The gray Seattle sky seemed to mirror Clara's soul as she stood in the empty hallway of what used to be her corner office on the 47th floor of the Columbia Tower. The rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows, each drop a reminder of the tears she had no strength left to cry. "Miss Rodriguez, security needs you to finish packing," the HR representative said softly, her voice barely audible above the hum of the air conditioning. Clara nodded, her hands trembling as she placed the last of her personal items into the cardboard box. 22 years at Henderson and Associates. 22 years of late nights, missed family dinners, and sacrifice weekends, all for a partnership that was now being stripped away because of one client's fraudulent activities that she had unknowingly facilitated. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into hell. Each floor that passed brought back memories. The 35th floor where she had her first major case victory, the 28th where she had mentored young lawyers, the lobby where she had shaken hands with some of the city's most influential people. As the doors opened to the marble lobby, Clara could hear the whispers of former colleagues. Their eyes followed her, some with pity, others with the cruel satisfaction that comes from watching someone's downfall. The Seattle streets were bustling with the usual afternoon rush, people hurrying past with their own problems and dreams. Clara stood on the sidewalk, box in hand, watching the world continue to spin while hers had completely stopped. Her phone buzzed, another reporter wanting a statement about the embezzlement scandal. She turned it off and hailed a taxi, giving the driver her Queen Anne address, wondering if she'd even be able to afford the ride home. The house that had once been her pride and joy now felt like a museum of her former life. Every room held memories of David, her ex-husband who had left 6 months earlier, and Emma, their daughter who had chosen to live with him in Portland after the divorce. Clara set the box down in her living room and looked around at the space that had once hosted dinner parties for judges, city council members, and fellow attorneys. The silence was deafening. She walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, nearly empty except for some takeout containers and a bottle of wine. As she reached for the wine, her reflection in the stainless steel surface stopped her cold. The woman staring back looked nothing like the confident attorney who had once commanded respect in courtrooms across Washington state. Her phone, despite being turned off, had accumulated dozens of voicemails. Most were from reporters, but there were a few from friends or people she had thought were friends expressing their shock and disappointment. The last message was from her mother in Los Angeles. "Mija, I saw the news. Come home, please." Clara poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the leather couch that David had insisted they buy. Everything in this house reminded her of the life she had built and lost. The partnership, the marriage, the respect of her peers, the trust of her clients, all gone in a matter of months. As evening fell over Seattle, the city lights began to twinkle like stars, but Clara felt nothing but darkness. She had always been the one others turned to for solutions, the one who could navigate the most complex legal challenges. But now, facing the collapse of everything she had worked for, she felt utterly lost. The rain continued to fall against her windows, and Clara realized that tomorrow would be the first day in over 2 decades that she wouldn't wake up as a practicing attorney. The thought terrified her more than any legal battle she had ever fought. 3 weeks had passed since Clara's termination, and the walls of her Queen Anne home felt like they were closing in. The morning light filtered through curtains she hadn't opened in days, illuminating the coffee table scattered with unopened bills, legal documents from her disbarment proceedings, and empty wine bottles. The doorbell rang, jolting Clara from her restless sleep on the couch. She wrapped her robe tighter and looked through the peephole to see her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, holding a covered dish. "Clara, dear, I brought you some soup," the elderly woman said when Clara reluctantly opened the door. "You haven't been taking care of yourself." Mrs. Chen's kindness was almost too much to bear. Clara hadn't spoken to anyone in days, and the simple human contact threatened to break the fragile composure she had been maintaining. "Thank you, but I'm fine," Clara managed, though her voice cracked on the words. "You're not fine, honey. Nobody would be." Mrs. Chen stepped inside without invitation, her eyes taking in the state of the living room. When was the last time you ate a real meal? Or showered? The truth was, Clara couldn't remember. Days blended together in a haze of grief, shame, and self-pity. She had stopped checking her emails after the first week, when they were filled with nothing but legal notices and expressions of false sympathy. Her bank account was dwindling rapidly. The mortgage on the house, the car payments, the credit card bills, they all assumed an income that no longer existed. She had received a few calls from headhunters, but news of her disbarment had spread quickly through Seattle's legal community. Clara, Mrs. Chen said gently, I lost my husband 3 years ago. I know what it's like when everything falls apart. But this isn't the end. Clara almost laughed at the irony. Here was this 78-year-old woman who had lost her life partner, trying to comfort her about losing a job and a reputation. Mrs. Chen, with all due respect, you don't understand. I've lost everything. My career, my marriage. My daughter barely speaks to me. I'm about to lose this house. I'm 48 years old, and I have to start over with nothing. You have your health, your intelligence, and your experience. That's not nothing. Mrs. Chen placed the soup on the kitchen counter and turned back to Clara. My Harold used to say that sometimes we have to lose everything to find out what really matters. After Mrs. Chen left, Clara stared at the bowl of homemade chicken soup, the first real food she'd seen in days. As she ate, she allowed herself to think about what Mrs. Chen had said. But the more she thought about it, the more impossible it seemed. She had defined herself entirely by her career. Without the title, the office, the cases, who was she? She had lost touch with most of her interests over the years, sacrificing hobbies and friendships for billable hours and client meetings. That afternoon, Clara finally opened her laptop and began going through her finances with the methodical approach she had once applied to complex legal cases. The numbers were brutal but honest. She had maybe 3 months before foreclosure, 2 months before the car would be repossessed. She started making a list of things she could sell: jewelry, furniture, artwork. Items that had once symbolized her success now represented her only lifeline. As evening approached, Clara found herself drawn to the large windows that offered a view of Elliott Bay. The water was choppy, reflecting the gray clouds above. She thought about David and Emma, probably having dinner together in Portland, their new life free from the drama and scandal that had consumed her world. She had tried calling Emma several times, but her daughter's responses were polite but distant. The shame of what had happened, of how it had affected their family, felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Clara opened another bottle of wine, telling herself it would be the last one. Tomorrow, she would figure out her next step. She would start making calls, looking for any kind of work that would keep her afloat while she figured out how to rebuild. But as she sat in the darkness of her living room, surrounded by the remnants of her former life, Clara couldn't imagine a tomorrow that held any hope at all. Clara woke up on the couch again, her neck stiff and her head pounding from another night of too much wine and too little sleep. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows told her she had lost another day to the depression that seemed to swallow her whole. Her stomach growled, reminding her that Mrs. Chen's soup had been her only real meal in 48 hours. She dragged herself to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, finding only condiments and expired milk. For the first time in weeks, Clara forced herself to shower and put on clean clothes. She needed groceries, and she couldn't keep hiding from the world forever. The simple act of getting dressed felt monumental, like climbing a mountain. Pike Place Market was bustling with tourists and locals, the familiar chaos of vendors calling out their wares and street musicians playing for tips. Clara had always loved this place when she was working. It represented the vibrant heart of Seattle that she was too busy to enjoy. Now, she moved through it like a ghost, clutching a short grocery list and counting the bills in her wallet. At the produce stand, Clara was carefully selecting the cheapest vegetables when she accidentally knocked over a display of apples. They scattered across the wet pavement, and she frantically began gathering them up, her face burning with embarrassment. Hey, slow down. It's okay. a warm voice said. Clara looked up to see a man in his mid-50s crouched beside her, helping collect the apples. He was wearing paint-stained jeans and a flannel shirt, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. "I'm so sorry," Clara stammered, her hands shaking as she reached for the fruit. "I'll pay for any damaged ones. Don't worry about it," the vendor, an older Greek man, said with a wave. "Marcus here will help you sort them out." Marcus, the man helping her, smiled and continued gathering apples. "You okay? You look like you could use a cup of coffee." Clara was about to decline automatically when something in his expression stopped her. There was no judgment there. No pity, just genuine concern from one human being to another. Yes, actually. That sounds nice," she heard herself say. They walked to a small cafe overlooking the Sound, and Marcus ordered 2 coffees and a blueberry muffin without asking what she wanted. Somehow, he seemed to understand that decision-making felt overwhelming right now. "I'm Marcus, by the way. Marcus Thompson. I run an art therapy program at the community center in Ballard." Clara Rodriguez. She hesitated, wondering if he'd recognize her name from the news coverage, but his expression remained unchanged. "So, Clara Rodriguez, what brings you to Pike Place on this fine Seattle afternoon? Besides rearranging the apple displays, I mean." For the first time in weeks, Clara almost smiled. There was something disarming about Marcus's gentle humor, his complete lack of pretense. She found herself really talking for the first time since her world had collapsed. She told him about losing her job, though she kept the details vague. She mentioned her divorce and her daughter who barely spoke to her anymore. She talked about feeling lost and useless, like she was 48 years old and starting life over from zero. Marcus listened without trying to fix anything, without offering platitudes about everything happening for a reason. He just nodded and occasionally asked questions that showed he was really hearing her. "You know," he said finally, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, "I used to be a corporate executive, marketing director for a big tech company. Made great money, had the corner office. The whole thing." Clara looked at him with surprise. His paint-stained clothes and calloused hands told a different story. "What happened?" "Burnout, mostly. And then my brother died in a car accident. And I realized I was spending my life doing work that didn't matter to me, surrounded by people who only cared about quarterly profits. So I quit. Went back to school for art therapy. Best decision I ever made, even though it scared the hell out of me at the time." "But that's different," Clara said. "You chose to leave." I lost everything because of mistakes I made, maybe. Or maybe life was pushing you towards something better, and you just couldn't see it yet." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "We're always starting a new program at the community center. We need volunteers, people to help with administration, organize events, mentor the participants. Most of our volunteers are retirees, but we could use someone with your professional background." Clara shook her head. "I don't know anything about art therapy." "You don't need to. You just need to show up and care about people. From what I can see, you've got that covered." As they parted ways, Marcus handed her a business card with the community center's information. "Think about it. Sometimes the best way to heal ourselves is to help other people heal." Walking back to her car, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a tiny spark of possibility. She wasn't ready to commit to anything yet, but for the first time since her life had fallen apart, she had made a genuine human connection with someone who seemed to see something in her worth salvaging. That night, instead of opening wine, Clara made tea and sat by her window looking out at the city lights. Turning Marcus's card over in her hands, Clara stared at Marcus's business card for 3 days before finally working up the courage to call the Ballard Community Center. Her hands shook as she dialed the number, and she hung up twice before letting it ring through. "Ballard Community Center. This is Marcus. Hi. It's Clara. From the market? You mentioned volunteering?" "Clara, I'm so glad you called. Can you come by this afternoon? I'd love to show you around." The community center was housed in an old brick building that had once been a textile factory. The walls were covered with colorful murals, and Clara could hear laughter and conversation. echoing from various rooms as Marcus gave her a tour. "This is our main art therapy room," he said, opening a door to reveal a bright space filled with easels, pottery wheels, and tables covered with art supplies. About a dozen people of various ages were working on different projects, lost in their creative processes. "These are our regulars," Marcus explained quietly. "We have everyone from teenagers dealing with trauma to seniors working through grief. Art becomes a language when words aren't enough." Clara watched a young woman, probably in her early 20s, painting what looked like a storm over a city. The girl's concentration was complete, her brushstrokes bold and emotional. "That's Jessica," Marcus said. "She's been coming for about 6 months. Lost her job and her apartment last year. Been couch surfing ever since. The painting helps her process the anxiety." Something about Jessica's situation resonated with Clara. The fear, the uncertainty, the feeling of having no stable ground to stand on. She understood all of that intimately. "What would I do exactly?" Clara asked. "Whatever feels right to you." Some volunteers help with administrative tasks, grant applications, organizing supplies, coordinating with social services. Others work more directly with participants. There's no wrong way to contribute. Marcus introduced Clara to Elena, the program coordinator, an energetic woman in her 30s with kind eyes and an infectious smile. "Marcus told me about your background," Elena said. "We could really use someone with your organizational skills. We're always applying for grants, and frankly, I'm terrible at the bureaucratic side of things." Clara felt a familiar stirring, the same feeling she used to get when presented with a complex legal problem. "What kind of grants?" For the next hour, Elena showed Clara their current funding applications, their budget spreadsheets, and their program documentation. It was a mess, well-intentioned but disorganized, with gaps in documentation that could cost them funding. "This application to the Morrison Foundation," Clara said, flipping through pages. "You're underselling your impact. You have great outcome data, but you're not presenting it effectively. Could you help us fix it?" Elena asked hopefully. Clara found herself nodding. For the first time in months, someone was asking for her expertise, not as a lawyer, but as someone who could organize information and present a compelling case. She spent the rest of the afternoon working with Elena to restructure their grant applications. The work felt familiar but different. Instead of fighting for corporate interests, she was advocating for people who needed help, for programs that actually made a difference in people's lives. As evening approached, Clara realized she had been so absorbed in the work that she hadn't thought about her own problems for hours. The feeling was both foreign and wonderful. "Same time tomorrow?" Elena asked as Clara packed up her notes. "Yes," Clara said without hesitation. "I'll work on this Morrison application at home tonight and bring back a revised draft." Walking to her car, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced since before her world collapsed, a sense of purpose. She wasn't fixing her own life yet, but she was helping fix something, and that felt like a beginning. That evening, Clara spread Elena's grant materials across her dining room table and began working. She found herself thinking about Jessica, the young woman who had lost her apartment, and about all the other people she had met at the center who were fighting their own battles with loss and uncertainty. For the first time in months, Clara worked late into the night, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And when she finally went to bed, it was with the satisfaction of knowing that tomorrow she would have something meaningful to contribute to the world again. 2 weeks into volunteering at the community center, Clara had transformed their grant application system. She arrived each morning with coffee for Elena and a growing sense of anticipation about the day's work. The Morrison Foundation application had been submitted, and they were already working on 3 more funding proposals. "Clara, you've been a godsend," Elena said, reviewing the latest draft of their application to the Seattle Arts Council. "These applications are so much stronger now." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. Compliments on her work had once been commonplace, but now they felt precious and meaningful. "I have an idea," Elena continued. "We're doing a presentation to potential donors next month, local business leaders, foundation representatives. Would you be willing to help present? You have a way of making our impact clear that I just don't have." Clara's immediate instinct was to say no. The thought of standing in front of a room full of Seattle's professional community terrified her. What if someone recognized her from the scandal? What if they questioned her credibility? I don't know, Clara said hesitantly. My public speaking days might be behind me. Think about it, Elena said gently. You don't have to decide right now. That afternoon, Clara was helping Jessica frame one of her paintings when the young woman asked, "What did you do before you came here?" "I was a lawyer," Clara said, the words feeling strange in her mouth. She rarely talked about her past with the program participants. A lawyer? Wow, that must have been intense. It was. Sometimes too intense. Clara stepped back to admire Jessica's work, a beautiful landscape with the sunrise breaking through dark clouds. This is gorgeous, Jessica. You have real talent. Jessica blushed. It's just something I mess around with. Not like it's going to pay the bills or anything. Art doesn't have to pay bills to be valuable. Look what it's done for you. You're different than when you first started coming here. Yeah, I guess I am. I mean, I still don't have my own place, and job hunting still sucks. But I don't know. I feel more like myself again. Clara understood exactly what Jessica meant. She was beginning to feel more like herself too, but a different version, one she was still getting to know. That evening, Clara got an unexpected call from Emma, her daughter. "Hi, Mom." Emma's voice was tentative. "Dad said I should call you. Check in. How are you doing, sweetheart?" Clara asked, her heart racing. They hadn't spoken in over a month. "I'm okay. School's good. I made the debate team." "That's wonderful. You always were good at arguing your point." Clara tried to keep her tone light, but she could hear the distance in her daughter's voice. "Mom, are you doing okay? Dad said you lost your job." Clara took a deep breath. She could tell Emma the sanitized version, or she could be honest. "I'm working through some things, Em. It's been hard, but I'm figuring it out. I'm volunteering at a community center, helping them with grant applications." "Volunteering? That doesn't sound like you." "Maybe I'm discovering parts of myself I didn't know were there." Clara walked to her window, looking out at the city lights. "I'd love to tell you about it sometime. Maybe you could visit?" There was a pause. "Maybe. I need to go do homework, but I'm glad you're okay, Mom." After hanging up, Clara felt both heartbroken and hopeful. Emma was still distant, but she had called. It was something. The next morning, Clara found Marcus in the art room, working with a group of teenagers who were part of a program for young people aging out of foster care. Elena mentioned the donor presentation. Marcus said as they watched the kids work, "You thinking about doing it?" "I'm terrified," Clara admitted. "What if I freeze up? What if they ask about my background?" "What if they do?" Marcus asked gently. "Your background is part of what makes you valuable here. You understand what it's like to lose everything and have to start over. That's not something to hide from, it's something that gives you credibility with the people we serve." Clara watched as one of the teenagers, a boy named Alex, struggled with a clay sculpture that kept collapsing. She walked over to him. "Having trouble?" she asked. "This stupid thing won't stay up," Alex said, frustrated. "Sometimes when something keeps falling down, it means the foundation isn't strong enough." Clara said, "What if we start over with a different base?" As they worked together to rebuild Alex's sculpture from the ground up, Clara realized Marcus was right. Her experience with failure and rebuilding wasn't something to be ashamed of, it was something that connected her to the people she was trying to help. That afternoon, Clara found Elena in her office. "About that presentation," Clara said. "I'll do it, but I want to tell them the whole truth about why I'm here, what I've learned, why this work matters." Elena smiled. "I think that's exactly what they need to hear." The morning of the donor presentation, Clara stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to wear. Her old power suits felt like costumes from another life, but she didn't want to look unprofessional. Finally, she chose a simple navy dress, confident but approachable. The presentation was being held at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel downtown, in a conference room filled with about 40 potential donors. Clara recognized several faces from her former professional life and felt her stomach clench with anxiety. "You've got this," Elena whispered as they prepared to begin. "Just speak from the heart." Marcus introduced the program with his usual warmth, showing slides of participant artwork and sharing statistics about their impact. Then it was Clara's turn. She walked to the podium, her hands slightly trembling. As she looked out at the audience, in the third row, she spotted Robert Henderson, her former law partner, looking uncomfortable. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away. "Good morning," Clara began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "My name is Clara Rodriguez, and 6 months ago, I was sitting in rooms like this as a successful attorney, writing checks to charities and feeling good about myself for giving back." A murmur went through the audience. Some recognized her name. 6 months ago, I lost everything: my career, my reputation, my marriage, and nearly my relationship with my daughter. I became one of the people I used to write checks to help. Except I was too proud and too ashamed to ask for help. Clara paused, letting the words settle. She could see surprise and curiosity in the faces looking back at her. I ended up at the Ballard Community Center not because I wanted to volunteer, but because a stranger showed me kindness when I desperately needed it. I thought I was just going to help with some paperwork, maybe organize a filing system. What I found instead was a community of people who understood what it meant to start over. She clicked to the next slide, showing Jessica's storm painting. This is Jessica. She's 23, lost her job and apartment last year, and has been struggling with anxiety and depression. When she first came to our program, she could barely make eye contact with anyone. Art therapy gave her a way to process her feelings and connect with others who understood her struggle. Clara clicked again, showing Alex's sculpture now successfully standing, refined and beautiful. This is Alex's work. He's 17, aging out of foster care, terrified about his future. When he started with us, everything he tried to build kept falling down. Sound familiar? A few people in the audience smiled. We learned together that sometimes you have to completely rebuild your foundation to create something that will stand. The room was completely quiet now, everyone listening intently. I used to think charity was about writing checks. I thought helping people meant giving them money and feeling good about myself. What I've learned is that real help, the kind that actually changes lives, is about connection, community, and giving people the tools to rebuild themselves. Clara looked directly at Robert Henderson as she continued, "The people in our programs aren't looking for handouts. They're looking for hope, for skills, for someone to believe in their ability to overcome their circumstances. They're looking for what I was looking for when I walked into that community center: a reason to believe that their story wasn't over." She clicked to a slide showing the program's outcomes: employment rates, housing stability, mental health improvements. These numbers are impressive, but they don't tell the whole story. The whole story is about human beings rediscovering their worth, their creativity, their ability to contribute to their communities. It's about a young woman who went from panic attacks to leading art workshops for other participants. It's about a man who lost his job at 55 and is now teaching pottery classes to seniors. Clara's voice grew stronger as she neared the end. It's about a former attorney who thought her useful life was over, who discovered that her real calling wasn't in a courtroom but in helping create spaces where people can heal and grow and become who they're meant to be. The applause started slowly, then grew stronger. Clara saw several people wiping their eyes, including Elena, who was beaming with pride. During the reception afterward, Clara was approached by numerous attendees. Some offered condolences about her legal troubles, but most wanted to talk about the program and how they could get involved. "That was incredibly brave," said a woman named Sarah, who introduced herself as director of a local foundation, "and incredibly effective. I'd like to discuss a significant grant opportunity with you." Robert Henderson approached her near the end of the event. "Clara," he said awkwardly, that was really something. I had no idea you were doing this kind of work. It's amazing what you discover about yourself when everything else falls away." Clara replied, her voice calm but not cold. "Listen, I know things ended badly between us, but what happened with the Morrison case, that wasn't entirely your fault. The firm made mistakes too. We should have had better oversight systems." Clara studied his face, seeing what might have been genuine regret there. "Thank you for saying that, Robert. But honestly, I'm not sure I'd change anything now. This work, these people, I never would have found them if my old life hadn't ended. As Clara drove home that evening, she realized something profound had shifted inside her. For the first time since her world had collapsed, she wasn't trying to get back to who she used to be. She was becoming someone entirely new, someone she was beginning to really like. The weeks following the donor presentation brought a whirlwind of activity. The Ballard Community Center received 3 major grant approvals, including a 2-year commitment from the Morrison Foundation, a delicious irony that wasn't lost on Clara. More importantly, they had a waiting list of volunteers and enough funding to expand their programming. "Clara, we need to talk," Elena said one morning, gesturing toward her office with barely contained excitement. "Good news, I hope?" Clara asked, settling into the familiar chair across from Elena's desk. "The board met last night. We want to offer you a position, full-time program development coordinator. It's not huge money, but it comes with health insurance and a salary that could help you keep your house." Clara stared at Elena, speechless. A real job, a salary, health insurance. Things she had taken for granted for so long suddenly felt like miracles. Wow, I wasn't expecting this. You've transformed how we operate," Elena continued. "Our grant success rate has tripled. We're serving twice as many people, and the participants love working with you. Yesterday, Jessica asked if you were going to be her mentor for the job readiness program she's starting." Clara felt tears threatening. "Jessica wants me to be her mentor? She says you understand what it's like to rebuild from nothing. That you don't just tell people it will be okay, you show them how to make it okay." That afternoon, Clara called her daughter with the news. "Mom, that's amazing." Emma's enthusiasm was the most genuine emotion Clara had heard from her in months. "Dad told me about your presentation. He said you were really brave." "Your father said that?" "Yeah, he did. He also said maybe I should come visit you soon. See what you're doing up there." "I'd love that, sweetheart. I'd love to show you the center, introduce you to some of the people I work with." After hanging up, Clara walked through her Queen Anne house with fresh eyes. The space that had felt like a museum of her former life was beginning to feel like home again. She had been so focused on what she'd lost that she hadn't noticed what she was gaining. That evening, Marcus stopped by with takeout from their favorite Thai restaurant, a tradition they'd developed over the past month of working together. "Congratulations on the job," he said, raising his beer bottle in a toast. "Elena called me right after she talked to you. She was practically vibrating with excitement." "I still can't quite believe it," Clara said. 6 months ago I thought my professional life was over. Now I'm starting something completely different. And it feels right. More right than anything has felt in years." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, looking out at Elliott Bay through Clara's large windows. The water was calm tonight, reflecting the city lights like scattered stars. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said eventually. "Of course." "What happened to you? The legal troubles, I mean." "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I've never asked, and I'm curious." Clara had been wondering when this conversation would come. She told him about the Morrison case, about the client who had been using her firm to launder money through real estate transactions, about how she had missed the signs that should have been obvious. "The worst part," she said, "was that I was so focused on billable hours and partnership politics that I stopped paying attention to the actual work. I became careless with something that should never be handled carelessly, people's trust." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You know what I think? I think you needed to learn what it felt like to lose everything so you could understand the people we work with. I think you needed to experience shame and fear and uncertainty so you could help others navigate those feelings." That's a very generous way to look at it. It's not generous, it's practical. The best therapists are often people who've been through trauma themselves. The best addiction counselors are usually people in recovery. Experience isn't just the best teacher, it's often the only teacher that really matters. Later that night, Clara sat at her computer working on a new grant application for a job training program. As she wrote about the challenges facing people who were rebuilding their lives, she drew not just on statistics and research, but on her own experience of waking up each morning wondering if she could survive another day of uncertainty. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. "Miss Rodriguez? This is Sarah Williams from the Seattle Community Foundation. We met at your presentation last month." "Of course. How are you, Sarah?" I'm calling with an unusual request. We have a board retreat coming up, and we're looking for someone to speak about the experience of being both a service provider and someone who has needed services. Would you be interested? Clara looked around her living room at the grant applications spread across her coffee table, at the photos from the community center on her mantle, at the view of Seattle that had witnessed both her downfall and her resurrection. Yes, she said without hesitation. I'd be honored to speak. As she hung up, Clara realized she was no longer the woman who had been fired from Henderson and Associates. She wasn't even the woman who had timidly walked into the community center looking for something to do with her time. She was becoming someone new, someone who could speak publicly about failure and recovery, someone who could help others navigate their own rebuilding processes. The transformation wasn't complete. She still had difficult days, still worried about money and whether Emma would ever fully trust her again. But for the first time in her adult life, Clara felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Spring in Seattle brought with it a sense of renewal that Clara could feel in her bones. Cherry blossoms dotted the city, and the persistent gray of winter was giving way to longer days and clearer skies. Clara had been in her new position at the community center for 3 months, and the work felt as natural as breathing. Mom, this place is incredible, Emma said, looking around the art therapy room with wide eyes. She had come up from Portland for a long weekend, their first extended time together since the divorce. Clara watched her daughter's face as Jessica, now a peer mentor in the program, explained her latest painting project. At 21, Emma was majoring in social work at Portland State, and Clara could see her professional curiosity engaged alongside her personal interest in her mother's new life. Jessica, tell Emma about your job interview tomorrow, Clara encouraged. I got an interview at a graphic design company, Jessica said, beaming. It's just entry level, but they saw some of my work from here and wanted to meet me. Clara helped me practice my interview skills. Emma looked at her mother with surprise. You know about graphic design? I'm learning. Clara laughed. Turns out there's a lot I didn't know about myself. That evening, Clara and Emma walked through Pike Place Market, ending up at the same cafe where Clara had first met Marcus. You seem different, Mom, Emma said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. More, I don't know, relaxed. Even with everything that happened, you seem happier than you were when you were a lawyer. I am happier, Clara said. I know that sounds crazy given everything I lost, but I think I was suffocating in that old life and didn't even realize it. Emma was quiet for a moment. I was angry at you for a long time, not just about the legal stuff, but about how I was angry at you for a long time, not just about the legal stuff, but about how you were never really present when I was growing up. Even when you were physically there, your mind was always on work. Clara felt the familiar ache of regret. I know, sweetheart. I thought I was working so hard for our family, but I was missing the actual family in the process. That's what I mean, though. You're different now. You're actually here, talking to me, not checking your phone or thinking about some case. It's like you finally learned how to be present. The next morning, Clara showed Emma the grant applications she was working on, explaining how each program served different populations with different needs. This housing stability program Jessica graduated from, it doesn't just help people find apartments. It teaches budgeting, connects people with mental health services, helps them build credit. The idea is to address the root causes, not just the symptoms. Emma studied the documents with the analytical mind Clara recognized from her own younger self. Have you thought about expanding this model to other cities? Actually, I have. We've been contacted by community centers in Portland and Spokane asking for consultation. Mom, Emma said slowly, what if I did my senior practicum here? My program requires 400 hours of field work, and I could do it anywhere in the Pacific Northwest. Clara looked up sharply from the papers. You'd want to do that? I think I could learn a lot here, and maybe we could work on some of those expansion ideas together. That afternoon brought another surprise. Robert Henderson called Clara directly, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Clara, I have a proposition for you. Our firm is launching a pro bono initiative focused on helping nonprofits with legal needs. We're looking for someone to coordinate the program, someone who understands both the legal side and the nonprofit world. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Are you offering me a job, Robert? I'm offering you a partnership in something meaningful, part-time, so you could keep your work at the community center. But Clara, we need someone who really understands what these organizations face, someone who can bridge the gap between corporate law and community service. After hanging up, Clara sat staring out her office window at the Ballard neighborhood she had come to love. A year ago, she would have jumped at any chance to return to the legal world. Now, the decision felt more complex. That evening, she discussed both developments, Emma's practicum idea and Robert's job offer with Marcus over dinner. Sounds like your old life and your new life are trying to merge, he observed. How does that feel? Terrifying and exciting at the same time, Clara admitted. A year ago, I would have seen Robert's offer as redemption, as proof that I could get my old life back. Now I see it as an opportunity to use my legal skills for something I actually care about. And Emma wanting to work with you? Clara smiled. That feels like a miracle I don't deserve, but I'm grateful for anyway. The following week brought news that the Morrison Foundation had approved their largest grant yet, enough funding to support the program expansion Emma had suggested and to hire additional staff. Clara, Elena said, reviewing the approval letter, they specifically mention your presentation and your innovative approach to program development. You've become the face of what we do here. That afternoon, Clara found herself back in the art room, helping a new participant, a woman in her 50s who had lost her job after 20 years with the same company. I don't know how to start over at my age, the woman, Patricia, said tearfully. I feel like my useful life is behind me. Clara knelt beside Patricia's table, remembering her own despair just months earlier. A year ago, I was sitting where you are, thinking exactly the same thing. I thought losing my career meant losing my identity, my value, everything that made me who I was. How do you get through it? One day at a time, one small step at a time, and by discovering that the skills and wisdom you've gained don't disappear when you lose a job, they just find new ways to be useful. As Clara helped Patricia begin sketching her feelings about her job loss, she realized that her own story had come full circle. She was no longer just rebuilding her own life, she was helping others rebuild theirs, using her experience with loss and recovery as a tool for healing. That evening, Clara called Robert back. I'll take the partnership, she said, but I have some conditions. The pro bono program needs to include training for your attorneys on working with nonprofit clients, and I want to make sure we're serving organizations that really need help, not just the ones that make good PR. Done, Robert said immediately. Clara, I think this is going to be something special. After hanging up, Clara looked around her queen and living room, no longer a museum of her former life, but a bridge between who she had been and who she was becoming. Tomorrow, Emma would arrive to start her practicum. Next week, Clara would begin splitting her time between the community center and Henderson and Associates. The month after that, they would break ground on the program expansion that would help similar communities across the Pacific Northwest. She had lost everything: career, marriage, reputation, but in rebuilding from nothing, she had discovered not just who she really was, but who she was meant to become. The miracle wasn't that she had survived the collapse of her old life. The miracle was that she had learned to build something better from the pieces. 6 months later, Clara stood in front of the Portland Community Center, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on what would become their newest satellite program. Emma, now officially her research assistant and practicum student, was interviewing local residents about their needs and interests. Mom? You need to hear this, Emma called, waving Clara over to where she was talking with a young father holding a toddler. This is Miguel, Emma explained. He heard about our program through the Seattle Participants Online community group. Miguel shifted his daughter to his other hip and looked at Clara with hopeful eyes. My wife died last year, and I've been struggling with depression while trying to raise Sophia alone. I lost my job 3 months ago, and I heard your program helps people get back on their feet. Clara felt the familiar tightening in her chest that came with recognizing her own experience reflected in someone else's story. Tell me more about what you're hoping to find. As Miguel described his challenges, the isolation, the financial stress, the feeling of being overwhelmed by responsibility while struggling with grief, Clara found herself taking notes not just as a program coordinator, but as someone who understood the particular weight of losing everything while trying to maintain hope for the future. We'll be opening in 6 weeks, Clara told him, but I can connect you with some resources in the meantime, and I think our Seattle participants would love to have you join their online support group. After Miguel left, Emma studied her mother's face. You get a different look when you talk to people like him, like you're seeing something the rest of us can't see. I'm seeing myself 18 months ago, Clara said simply. I'm seeing what I needed and didn't know how to ask for. That afternoon, Clara drove back to Seattle for a meeting at Henderson and Associates. The pro bono program had grown beyond anyone's expectations, with attorneys volunteering for cases that ranged from helping immigrant families navigate legal systems to assisting nonprofits with complex compliance issues. Clara, look at these numbers, said Jennifer Walsh, one of the firm's senior partners, spreading documents across the conference table. Our attorney satisfaction scores are up 15% since we started the pro bono initiative. People are saying they feel more connected to the actual impact of their work. Robert nodded. 3 attorneys have specifically mentioned that working with nonprofit clients has made them better lawyers overall. They're more focused on practical solutions instead of just billable hours. Clara reviewed the program statistics with the same careful attention she had once given to corporate contracts. I want to propose something, she said. What if we created a sabbatical program where attorneys could spend 3 to 6 months working full-time with nonprofits? Full salary, full benefits, but total immersion in community service work. That's expensive, Jennifer pointed out. Is it more expensive than losing good attorneys to burnout? Or than having a reputation as a firm that only cares about corporate profits? Clara asked. I think you'd find that attorneys who come back from those sabbaticals would be more committed to the firm and more effective in their work. The room was quiet as the partners considered the proposal. Clara realized that a year and a half ago, she would have been too intimidated to suggest such a radical change. Now, she had the confidence that came from understanding what really motivated people to do their best work. That evening, Clara had dinner with Marcus and Elena to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of her joining the community center. I have an announcement, Elena said, raising her wine glass. The board has approved my recommendation to create a new position, Regional Director of Program Development. Clara, the job is yours if you want it. Clara looked at her 2 closest friends, people who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. What would that mean exactly? It means you'd oversee the expansion to 5 new cities over the next 2 years. It means traveling, consulting, training new staff, and essentially replicating what we've built here. It means a significant salary increase and the opportunity to impact thousands of people instead of hundreds, Marcus grinned. It means you've become exactly what this movement needs, someone who understands both the business side and the human side of community development. That night, Clara sat in her living room going through a box of letters from program participants. Jessica had written to thank her for helping with interview preparation for the graphic design job she'd not only gotten but been promoted in. Alex had sent a photo of his first apartment, along with a note saying the pottery classes he now taught were helping him save money for community college. There was a letter from Patricia, the woman who had felt too old to start over, announcing that she had been hired as a program coordinator at a senior center. You helped me realize that my experience wasn't a liability, it was my greatest asset, she had written. But it was the last letter that brought tears to Clara's eyes. It was from Miguel in Portland. Dear Clara, I wanted you to know that joining the online support group changed everything for me. Just knowing there were other people who understood what it was like to rebuild their lives while grieving gave me hope I hadn't felt in months. Sophia and I are doing better, and I can't wait for the Portland program to open. I'm planning to volunteer as a peer mentor once I get back on my feet. You showed me that healing happens in community, and I want to help create that for other people. Thank you for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. Clara set the letter down and looked out at Seattle's skyline, the city lights reflecting off Elliott Bay like scattered diamonds. 2 years ago, she had stood at these same windows feeling like her life was over. Tonight, she was planning the expansion of programs that would help people across the Pacific Northwest rebuild their lives after loss. The transformation hadn't been about getting back what she had lost, it had been about discovering what she had never known she had. The ability to turn her own experience with failure and recovery into a tool for healing others. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, Miguel is already connecting with other parents in the online group. He's organizing a Portland meetup for next weekend." "This is amazing." Clara smiled and typed back. "The best part about healing is that it's contagious. People who have been helped become helpers." Tomorrow, she would call Elena to accept the regional director position. Next week, she would present the sabbatical proposal to Henderson and Associates' full partnership. Next month, she would break ground on community centers in 3 new cities. But tonight, she was simply grateful for the mysterious way that losing everything had led her to find not just herself, but her true calling. The miracle wasn't that she had survived the collapse of her old life, it was that she had learned to build something better from the ruins. 2 years after Clara Rodriguez had walked out of the Columbia Tower carrying a cardboard box and believing her life was over, she stood on the stage of the Seattle Convention Center addressing an audience of 500 community development professionals from across the country. "When I lost my career, my marriage, and very nearly my relationship with my daughter," Clara began, her voice steady and confident, "I thought I was experiencing the worst thing that could happen to a person. Today, I want to tell you why I now believe it was the best thing that ever happened to me." In the audience, Emma sat in the front row next to Marcus and Elena, beaming with pride. In the third row, Robert Henderson nodded approvingly. The sabbatical program had been so successful that Henderson and Associates was now consulting with other law firms on implementing similar initiatives. "The miracle wasn't that I survived losing everything," Clara continued. "The miracle was that I discovered losing everything wasn't actually losing everything. It was losing the things that were keeping me from becoming who I was meant to be." She clicked to a slide showing statistics from their now 6-city program network. In the past 18 months, our expanded community art therapy programs have served over 2,000 individuals across the Pacific Northwest. 87% have achieved stable housing. 73% have found employment or enrolled in job training programs. But those numbers, impressive as they are, don't tell the real story. The next slide showed photos of program participants. Jessica, now running her own freelance design business and mentoring new participants. Alex, who had just started his second year of community college on a full scholarship. Patricia, who had become a program coordinator herself. Miguel, who was preparing to open the Portland Center's first father support group. The real story is about transformation, not just recovery, but discovery. Discovery of resilience people didn't know they had, of talents they had never explored, of purposes they had never imagined. Clara paused, scanning the audience. "I used to think success meant climbing a ladder, getting the corner office, making partner, accumulating wealth and status." Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "So your speech online, you changed my life. And now you're changing thousands of others. Thank you for showing me that starting over isn't about getting back what you lost, it's about building something better than what you lost." Clara smiled and typed back, "You taught me that just as much as I taught you. That's the real miracle, we heal each other." Tomorrow, she would start planning the expansion to 4 more cities. Next month, she would present the sabbatical program model to a conference of law firms in Chicago. Next year, she would publish the book she was writing about community-based recovery programs. But tonight, Clara Rodriguez, former attorney, current community builder, living proof that losing everything can be the beginning of finding everything, was simply grateful for the mysterious grace that had led her from the worst day of her life to the best work of her life. The miracle wasn't that she had survived losing everything. The miracle was that she had learned to transform loss into purpose, failure into wisdom, and her own healing into a tool for healing others. That transformation had rippled out from one community center in Seattle to a network spanning the Pacific Northwest, touching thousands of lives and proving that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the most devastating losses. As Clara turned off the lights and headed to bed, she realized that her story wasn't really about recovery at all. It was about discovery, the discovery that her real life had been waiting for her all along, hidden beneath the career and identity she had thought defined her worth. She had lost everything and found everything, and in doing so, had helped others do the same. That was the miracle she had never seen coming, and the gift she would spend the rest of her life sharing with anyone brave enough to believe that their story wasn't over, even when it felt like the end. What I've learned is that real success is about building bridges, connecting your own experience with other people's needs, using your skills in service of something larger than yourself. She clicked to a slide showing the expansion map. 6 cities now, with plans for 10 more in the next 2 years. This work started because a stranger showed me kindness when I desperately needed it. Marcus Thompson, who runs our original Seattle program, saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. He offered me a chance to help others, which gave me a chance to heal myself. Clara found Marcus in the audience and smiled, but the true miracle is what happened next. Every person we helped became someone who could help others. Jessica now mentors other young adults struggling with anxiety. Alex teaches pottery to teenagers aging out of foster care. Miguel is creating support networks for single fathers. Patricia is developing programs for people over 50 who are rebuilding their careers. She clicked to the final slide, a photo of Clara and Emma working together in the Portland Center, surrounded by participants and volunteers. My daughter Emma is now the research director for our entire network. She's developing evaluation tools that are being adopted by community programs across the country. The relationship I thought I had destroyed became stronger than it ever was when I was too busy with my career to really know her. Emma wiped tears from her eyes as the audience applauded. So what was the miracle? The miracle was learning that when you think you've lost everything, you've actually just cleared space for everything that was meant to be there. The miracle was discovering that my real skills weren't in a courtroom, they were in helping people navigate the legal and bureaucratic systems that often seem designed to keep them stuck. Clara's voice grew stronger as she neared the end. The miracle was finding out that my experience with failure made me better at helping other people succeed. That my experience with shame made me better at helping other people reclaim their dignity. That my experience with starting over made me better at helping other people build new lives. She stepped away from the podium, her confidence complete. I lost a career, but I found a calling. I lost a marriage, but I found a deeper relationship with my daughter. I lost my old identity, but I found my true self. That wasn't just recovery. It was resurrection. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. As Clara left the stage, she was approached by community leaders from 12 different states wanting to discuss program implementation in their cities, but the moment that mattered most came later, at the reception, when a young woman approached her nervously. Miss Rodriguez? I'm Sarah Chan. I'm a social worker in Tacoma, and I've been following your program expansion. I wanted to ask you about something. Of course. What can I help you with? I lost my job 6 months ago because I spoke up about unsafe conditions at the treatment facility where I worked. I've been blacklisted in my field, and I'm struggling with depression and anxiety. I don't know how to start over at 35. Clara looked at Sarah's face and saw her own desperation from 3 years earlier. Can I give you my card? And can I tell you about a community center in Tacoma that's part of our network? You'd do that? Sarah, 3 years ago, I was standing where you are now. Someone showed me that there was a path forward, even when I couldn't see it. That's what we do, we help each other find the path. Later that evening, Clara sat in her Queen Anne living room with Emma, Marcus, and Elena, sharing takeout and reflecting on the day. Mom, Emma said, when you were telling that story about losing everything, I realized something. I was so angry at you back then, but losing everything was what made you finally become the mother I needed. What do you mean? When you were a lawyer, You were always trying to fix everything for everyone. You couldn't just be present with people's problems, you had to solve them. But when you lost your ability to fix things, you learned how to just be with people in their pain. That made you a better mother and a better helper. Marcus raised his beer. To Clara Rodriguez, who taught us that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're really made of, to all of us, Clara corrected, who learned that the best way to heal ourselves is to help heal each other. As her friends left that night, Clara stood once again at her living room windows, looking out at Seattle's lights reflecting on Elliott Bay. The view was the same, but everything else had changed.